And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host Kenneth Gruenfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Wednesday, March 12th. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. It makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, GSMCPodcast.net. That is GSMCPodcast.net. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we are going to start off the show. We are going to talk about where the top two remaining quarterbacks will end up. Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. We'll get into that and some of the other quarterback moves as well. We'll talk about Daniel Jones. We mentioned it briefly yesterday on the show when the news broke, but we will talk about how that impacts the Colts situation with Anthony Richardson. But the main thing is talking about Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, as their choices have now narrowed down. Then in the second part of the show, we'll talk about some of the other wide receiver news, wide receiver deals. DeAndre Hopkins recently signed a one-year deal with the Ravens. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Chris Godwin re-signing with the Buccaneers. All of that. We'll go through a majority of the wide receiver deals. And then in the third part of the show, we'll talk about the Eagles. There were a handful of players that have left via free agency or trade, and we'll talk about the impact of that. We'll also talk about the 49ers. I will do a season overview of their season, as well as talk about a lot of the players that have left their team as well and the impact of that. And then we will talk about Garrett Cole. We will get to some other news other sports news besides football, because there's just been so much going on, so much to cover. But we will talk about Garrett Cole and the impact of his injury, as he is going to miss the 2025 season and he will undergo Tommy John surgery. So we will talk about the impact of that and how the Yankees will handle that. So, with that being said, let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson and where they could potentially end up. So, it seems like we are getting a clearer picture on where they could potentially go. It could very well come down to the Giants and the Steelers. And if one goes to one team, then the other is going to go to the other team. That's how I see it. Now, there are some other teams that could potentially come in and maybe sign one of them. You know, the Vikings. Right now, the only quarterback that is on their roster is J.J. McCarthy. So they could maybe look to bring in Aaron Rodgers. I could see Aaron Rodgers going to Minnesota, but I don't know about Russell Wilson. And you've been seeing on social media that the Vikings are a dark horse team to watch out for in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes, if you want to call it that. So, yeah, you got the Vikings. The Titans, I really don't know what they're doing. You know, they do have the number 1 overall pick. Do they trade it away on draft night? Are they going to take a quarterback? I mean, we'll see what happens, but they're another team that doesn't need a quarterback. But I do think that the Giants and the Steelers, in one way or another, are going to end up with at least one of these guys. I think if Aaron Rodgers goes to the Steelers, the Giants are going to end up with Russell Wilson, and vice versa. When it comes to Russ, last year, he met with the Giants. They were thinking about bringing him in. But with the Steelers, when they came calling, he felt like he had a better opportunity with the Steelers. And I don't blame him. Because I think it was discussed with Russ that you're not guaranteed the starting job. It's going to be Daniel Jones. Now, eventually, Russ probably would have taken over because Daniel Jones didn't finish out the year with the Giants as the starter, and they ended up releasing him. And we'll talk about him in a little bit here. But with the Steelers, I guess it was made known to him, hey, you're going to be the starter. Now, he wasn't the starter when the year began because Justin Fields was playing and he got, well, it was really because Russ got hurt. But then once Russell Wilson got healthy, they put him back in and he was the starter the rest of the year. And the Steelers kind of negatively impacted themselves by doing that because now Justin Fields said, okay, well, you guys benched me when we had a winning record, so I'm going to go to a team that actually, is going to commit to me for a whole season. And that's the Jets. The Jets needed an upgraded quarterback. Well, right now, because Tyrod Taylor, I would not have gone into the season with Tyrod Taylor as my starting quarterback. I just wouldn't. So, if Russ goes back to the Steelers, now I thought the book was closed on that because I thought Justin Fields, they're going to re-sign him. You keep hearing that Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, that's who the Steelers are zoning in on. Bring one of those two back. And most people thought it was going to be Justin Fields, but he ends up going to the Jets. So now that opens the door once again. That opens the book again to Russell Wilson. He can come back in. He was in the system last year. They brought over DK Metcalf, so Russ can throw some moon balls to him. So, yeah, it does make sense. And you get him for cheap. Now, of these two quarterbacks, I think Aaron Rodgers is better. Now, Aaron Rodgers is coming off of a down year, and a down year for him is 28 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, coming off of a major injury. Now, he is older than Russell Wilson. He's in his 40s. So, if the Steelers were to bring in Aaron Rodgers, you are getting an older quarterback, an even older quarterback. But I do think it would be an upgrade over Russell Wilson. Now, what we were talking about in our production meeting is George Pickens and DK Metcalf, not the best route runners. So it was talked about, like, yeah, maybe Russ would be the better fit because Russ can just throw up 50-50 balls to Pickens and DK Metcalf. That's true. But Aaron Rodgers still has the arm talent to throw up those 50-50 balls. And I feel like one way or another, the Steelers could still make it work. And you still got some other playmakers on that side of the ball, too. Now, maybe they add another receiver, or you're hoping that guys take the next step. Calvin Austin, like I've been saying, he showed some promise. We didn't see Roman Wilson play at all last year, really. The rookie wide receiver out of Michigan. Really didn't see anything out of him. So maybe you're hoping that in year 2 he could bounce back. The Steelers actually just signed Kenneth Gainwell today, I believe. But they did sign him. So you got him, and you're going to have Jaylen Warren. Now, I don't know if they're going to add any more to that running back room. So, and then, yeah, you got Pat Freiermuth, which I think, you pair Pat Freiermuth up with Aaron Rodgers, I think that would be good because, Pat Freiermuth is a good tight end, and Rodgers would benefit from that. But, and when it comes to the Steelers, when you're comparing the Steelers and the Giants, the Steelers give both these guys a better chance to win. They do. And right now, with Cleveland and their quarterback issues and the Bengals, and who knows what their defense is going to look like next year with Trey Hendrickson on the trade block, the Steelers, I think, are still the second best team in the division. So I think, and they always make the playoffs. They don't have a losing record. They never have a losing record with Mike Tomlin. So that's the better situation. But with the Giants, you pair up Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers with Malik Nabers. They re-signed Darius Slayton, which we'll talk about, which I was surprised that happened. They have some weapons on the offensive side of the ball, and Tyrone Tracy showed you promise. The problem is, and the Steelers, I think are in a well. The Steelers are a young, up and coming offensive line. They just got to really grow and develop. The Giants, as long as Andrew Thomas could stay healthy, that line isn't that bad. But if Andrew Thomas goes down, the whole offensive line fell apart. That's why they brought in this tackle that they signed over from Cleveland, add some more depth there at that position. And I like what the Giants have done on the defensive side of the ball this offseason. Giants defense on paper is not bad. It's not. But it's a harder path. It's a much harder path. And it's a team coming off of 3 wins. And you're in a division with the Cowboys, the Commanders, and the Eagles. So ultimately, one of them is going to go there. Now, I think Russ is probably going to be the one that ends up with the Giants. I know I was kind of leaning towards maybe Aaron Rodgers is going to go there. But I feel like if Rodgers wants to win, he should go to the Steelers. But maybe money, they're not on the same page with that. Who knows? Maybe Rodgers wants to show the Jets, hey, I could still play. You guys made a mistake. And goes to the Giants, goes across the hall. But only time will tell. And then lastly, let's just get into Daniel Jones really quick. So the Colts signed him to a 1-year, $14 million deal to be competition to Anthony Richardson. Does that mean we're going to see Daniel Jones start some games next year? I think we definitely could. We definitely could. Because not only does Anthony Richardson have a chance to go out there and not play well and they bench him, but he could also get hurt and Daniel Jones could come in. But then again, you could say, well, Daniel Jones has had plenty of injuries. He could get hurt. And then what did the Colts do then? But they really wanted to bring in competition. They brought in Flacco last year, and that didn't really pan out. They didn't get the magic that they were hoping they would get with him, like how he played with the Browns. So they brought in a younger quarterback. And this is a better situation for Daniel Jones. I mean, how do you go back? If he went back to Minnesota, that would have been even better than the Colts. But the Colts, they have a very good running game with Jonathan Taylor. You got some good young receivers. So I think if he does start some games for them, I definitely think you could see a better version of Daniel Jones as opposed to what we've been seeing with the Giants. But let me know what you guys think about the quarterback stuff. Where do you think these guys will end up? Like I said, it's going to come down to the Giants and the Steelers. That's really the sense I'm getting. So we are going to take our first break. When we come back, we will talk about all the wide receiver deals and where Cooper Kupp could potentially end up because the Rams are going to release him and he will be out on the open market. So with that being said, stick around and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast. Sorry about that. So for one final time today, make sure to stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Sports Podcast.